Thank you, Emily. Since the nation's earliest times, North Carolina has been a leader in higher education, founding the first public university in 1793 and building an enviable network of public universities, private colleges, all that play a central role in the state's efforts to embrace the industries and technologies of tomorrow. Good morning, everyone. I'm Randall Johnson, NCEDA Immediate Past President, here to welcome you and thank our sponsors and kick off today's webinar. This is the second installment of a multi-part series on higher education's leadership role in economic development, and we're delighted to have you join us today. Before we begin, I want to direct your attention to an important list of organizations and companies that play a big part in bringing you professional development offerings like this one. They're our annual sponsors, and you'll see their names and logos scrolling across your screen now. We're grateful for their ongoing support of NCEDA across all aspects of our mission. Please thank them when you see them. Our higher education assets, be they 2- or 4-year campuses, public or private, in person or online, are key drivers of North Carolina's economic development, growth, and development. All are vital to the 21st century prosperity of the state. The 16 campuses of the UNC system, plus the North Carolina School of Science and Math, complement and collaborate with the state's 58 campus community college network, as well as the 36 private institutions that comprise the North Carolina independent colleges and universities. And more recently, the Western Governors University of North Carolina has expanded student access to post-secondary education through a unique array of competency-based curricula. And I'm proud to say that college and university officials are now a growing segment of NCEDA's own membership, adding their voices to important conversations on workforce development, talent pipelines, entrepreneurial ecosystems, technology transfer strategies, and community advancement. I noticed the names of many of our educational partners are on today's roster of attendees, and we welcome you. Thanks for joining us, as well as several guests who are joining us for the first time. Welcome. Now it's my pleasure and honor to introduce Charles Hayes, a longtime NCEDA leader and past president most of us know well. For much of his career, he's had one foot in economic development and the other in higher education. For nearly 20 years, he headed the Research Triangle Partnership, where he brought a great deal of distinction to North Carolina and his world-class research institutions. From 2005 to 2011, Charles served on the UNC Board of Governors, working alongside top higher education officials from all over North Carolina. And since 2016, he's been a senior fellow at East Carolina University's Economic Development Academy, where he's led the important partnership surrounding the North Carolina Certified Economic Developer Program. I could go on and on about Charles, but our time is short, so I just want to say how grateful NCEDA is for Charles' great work, for our organization, and for our state, and our thanks to him for moderating today's webinar. Charles, take it away.
Thank you, Randall. I appreciate that. And while I was on the UNC Board of Governors, the economic and something called the Economic Transformation Council was created. The Economic Transformation Council was created under the leadership of Molly Broad, who was then president of the university system, and J.B. Milliken, who was vice president. Molly went on to become the president of the American Council on Education, where the current chancellor at ECU was working before he went to ECU. And JB, and Molly's retired now, and JB currently is the chancellor of the University of Texas system. So those two were instrumental in founding this. And part of the reason that we founded the Economic Transformation Council, Leroy Lael and I were both, well, Leroy was chair of a subcommittee on economic development, and I followed Leroy as the chair of that subcommittee. I don't know that subcommittee exists now with the Board of Governors. It may, I just don't know. But at that time, we were trying to make sure that all of our 16 campuses and the School of Science and Math had economic development in their mission somewhere. Of course, the three major buckets that the universities work are teaching, research, and public service. And we wanted to make sure that economic development was a highlight of that public service. And so the Transformation Council was formed, and another one of the reasons was we wanted practitioners in economic development to be able to find the resources they needed fairly easily by having a person at each of the campuses that was designated as a go-to person for professional economic developers. Because if you've tried to go through the university system, and this is not meant to be a negative, but the way our universities and colleges operate, they pretty much operate in silos. I know you're not supposed to say that because that's not a good, doesn't sound good. But it's not that the chemistry department doesn't know what the political science department's doing. Oftentimes, the large molecules in the chemistry department don't know what the small molecules are doing. So we need somebody to help us wade through that. So now we have this economic transformation council, economic development transformation council, and each of the universities have someone that's on that council. Today, we're going to hear from 3 of those. And we're going to wrap those 3 will speak, and then they're going to wrap up with the overview or the person batting back up as a trustee of one of our universities. So to start off with, we're going to go into order. I wrestled a bit with about what order we would have them present, and I came up with the order that makes some sense, at least in academic circles, that we will start with the oldest university and then go to the most recent one. We have representatives from UNC Chapel Hill, Don Hobart. Don is the Associate Vice Chancellor for Research at UNC Chapel Hill, and Don has waded in the waters of economic development in a number of different areas through his career, and still is one of the real leaders. And of course, Don, as Randall mentioned, UNC Chapel Hill was the first university created in this state, and in fact, public university in this nation. And that'll be followed by Tom Hall at Pembroke. Tom is executive director of the Thomas Entrepreneurship Hub and Incubator at UNC Pembroke, or simply the Thomas Entrepreneurship Hub. Tom is fairly new to North Carolina, but his background and experience is exemplary. He is going to be really make a good contribution to our state. And incidentally, Pembroke was founded in 1887, and that will be followed by Mark Lanier at UNCW. And Mark is assistant to the chancellor and assistant secretary to the UNCW Board of Trustees. Mark is our dean. He was, I think, probably the only one that still was of the original Economic Transformation Council members, and he's been around for a long time and is a real leader in his part of the state in economic development issues all across the board. Each one is going to tell functions a little bit differently than the others, but we'll look forward to hearing from them as we get ready to jump into that. And after the presentations, we got to wrap up by Pat, and then put Pat Corso. I almost forgot you, Pat. I'm sorry. Pat is a long-term North Carolina native. He is a North Carolinian. He raised his children in North Carolina. He and his wife have been contributors to our state for many years. Pat currently serves as the UNC Board of Trustees chair, and he before that he was the Partners in Progress, which is the economic development program for Moore County. He ran that for a number of years as the lead there, and before that, he had a consulting firm, and he has also led the resort division of Club Corp, which was in international division, actually, was in several, well, at least one other country. And he's also served on the state economic development board. Pat is a real leader in economic development throughout the state and has been for a number of years. So once we hear those 4, we will have question and answers. And so without further ado, Don, take it away. You got the floor.
Hey, Charles, many thanks. It's an honor to be here, frankly, with this group. I mean, folks like Mark and Tom and Pat are great colleagues and have contributed tremendously to the state's economic development. when I began my work at UNC Chapel Hill, it was about 10 years ago, and I had spent about 12 years working in state economic development, and I was absolutely embarrassed to realize how little I understood about UNC Chapel Hill's role in economic development. I thought I knew about it when I started, and I just discovered within the first month that there was so much more that I didn't appreciate. So I love to talk about it because it is a tremendous resource for North Carolina. The points that I often make to people when I'm trying to explain how UNC Chapel Hill fits into the grand scheme of economic development, I like to emphasize three things. We are really, really old. We are really, really big. And we are really, really decentralized. If you understand those 3 points, you'll understand a lot about how UNC Chapel Hill operates. And that's sort of the reality of any truly old research institution, university institution. The first part, really old. Yeah, we got our start back in the 1700s. For most of our existence, we were the University of North Carolina, but fortunately, the system itself has really diversified, and we now have a great group of partners. If you go back to the 1800s, UNC Chapel Hill's chemistry department led the development and the discovery of the practical process for developing calcium carbide in acetylene gas. What's that, you wonder? Well, that's ultimately what led to the metallurgy that enables people to have skyscrapers. It also directly led to the development of the Union Carbide Company. All originated out of the chemistry department at UNC. And if you wonder where a lot of those Moorheads and Keenans got their money, that's kind of where it came from. In the 1950s, UNC was integrally involved, along with NC State University, in the development of the Research Triangle Park as a concept, but also directly involved in the recruitment of industries, particularly those first industries that were what laid the foundation for the growth that we see today. Bill Little, chemistry professor, UNC Chapel Hill, Charles reminded me of this, was integral in the recruitment of ChemStrand, which was the first company in the Research Triangle Park. And to the big part of UNC Chapel Hill, we are a $1 billion research enterprise. We, on an annual basis, run $1 billion in research that comes largely from out of state and has a huge economic impact in the state. We're in the top 10 for federal research funding. We hover around the top 10 for funding from all sources as a research university. Our payroll for research is $300 million annually. Those employees are all over the state of North Carolina. We do around 100 million in business with North Carolina companies, just companies alone. And that's thousands of businesses in North Carolina. UNC has spun out about 800 startups since the 1950s. That includes companies like IQVIA, which used to be called Quintiles, which is a global company with billions in revenue. We are very decentralized, as I said. And if you are looking for an organization like the military, where you've got one person who's in charge and everybody marches in lockstep behind them, you are not going to find that at UNC Chapel Hill. We have a huge team of people who are active in economic development at all aspects, in all aspects across the state. We are this collection of schools and departments and centers and institutes, many of which have their own people that are directly engaged in economic development initiatives at various levels and around the state. Our individual faculty are super entrepreneurial, and they have their own relationships and their own contacts and the work that they do. We do have some folks at the central level who help coordinate things and serve as sort of central resources. I'm an example of that in the Vice Chancellor for Research Office. And like I said, as Charles said, I serve on the Economic Transformation Council, but we've got other folks here as well who do that. Michelle Bolus in the Chancellor's Office, and her role leading Innovate Carolina and all of the innovation and entrepreneurial programs that are so critical to the university's success. Cheryl Waddell, who works with the economic development initiatives at UNC, including the development of innovation hubs in the region that come out of the university, as well as the Chancellor's Downtown Economic Development Initiative. Let's see, we've got programs scattered all over the university that are relevant to economic development, from the Institute for Convergent Science. We've got the Eshelman Innovation Institute, the School of Pharmacy. Our School of Government is itself its own giant statewide outreach program. We've got the NC Create program and folks like Mark Little, who are very involved in community development, programs like Carolina Kickstart, which support the development and spin out of faculty technology and companies. Our Department of City and Regional Planning has a long history of working closely on economic development related initiatives. And individual units like our infectious disease program, it's a global program. It employs people around the world, brings in millions of dollars to North Carolina in research, and of course was at a ground floor level and integrally involved in the fight against COVID-19 and the development of pharmaceuticals and products around that. And as a result, we've got programs right now like READY, rapidly emerging antiviral drug development initiative that is at the cutting edge of coming up with technologies to fight not just COVID-19, but viral infections at all levels. We're the home to UNC Healthcare. That's another 10,000 employees all over North Carolina. And some of you know the story of North Carolina's gene therapy industry, but all of that development that you see down there around Sanford with Pfizer is a direct outgrowth of the research work, sort of the fundamental research work that was being done by pioneers at UNC like Jude Samulski. And that work, Jude working through folks with our Innovate Carolina program and our technology commercialization program, spun out patents and startup companies that ultimately were purchased for billions of dollars and remarkably are still here in North Carolina and led to the development of the Pfizer investments in Sanford and also investments in the Research Triangle as well. So North Carolina currently is a real leader in the gene therapy industry as a result of that, and it's paid off huge in terms of economic dividends. A question that comes up a lot when talking with people at UNC or about UNC is, well, who do I go to tap into the assets that UNC has to offer? And the answer is there are a lot of places of entry. Like I said, I serve with the Economic Transformation Council, and I get lots of questions about, who's the best person to do this or who's the best person to talk to about that. So I do a lot of referral, but there really is no wrong entry point. Folks like Michelle Bolas and Cheryl Waddell are great resources. Some of you know, I think Harrison Gilbert in my office, who you've worked with on economic development projects. The philosophy at UNC has really been to encourage the initiative on the part of faculty members and on the part of units to serve the state and serve as resources where that's needed. And so for anyone who's looking to connect at UNC, I've put some links on the website to some of the units that are involved in economic development initiatives, but always happy to serve as a coordinator and a connector, because like I said, I came from 12 years in economic development to UNC Chapel Hill and really had no appreciation of how little I knew about what's there. And so feel free to tap any of the folks I've talked to as resources, reach out to me if I can be helpful. Again, at UNC, I think the real message is we are a highly entrepreneurial university that is really focused on giving people the power and the ability to change the world and to serve North Carolina. And so we're much more concerned about doing that than claiming credit for it.
Thank you, Don. Now we'll hear from Tom.
Thank you, Charles, and thank you, Don. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Tom Hall. I run the Thomas Entrepreneurship Hub down in Pembroke, North Carolina, and many of you know this area. It's part of, that's where the UNC Pembroke campus is, part of Robinson County. Our focus at the Hub is really in close to Pembroke and Robinson County, and then the 10 counties around this region. The Commerce might call the Sandhills Prosperity Zone. Everyone knows it's highly diverse. It's home to the Lumbee Native American tribe and a number of other groups. So it's a wonderful area, but it has a number of challenges in terms of job creation, startups, drugs, a lot of challenges, early childhood education. So our focus really is to try to develop more economic vitality and jobs by working with startups and helping them to succeed. We are in a 20,000 square foot facility. It's an entrepreneurship hub with all the traditional aspects. We have 10 incubator spaces, a maker space, a co-working space, a bunch of conference rooms, and that sort. We have a well-developed staff that includes a number of entrepreneurs and residents by function. So we'll have a marketing expert or a funding expert. We also work very closely with SBTDC, who has 3 counselors in the building. Just a little bit about the history, which I think is important, because I think it makes our hub really successful, and that is in Jim Thomas. The Thomas Entrepreneurship Hub, I'm not the Thomas. Some people think I'm the Thomas, but the Thomas is really Jim Thomas, who has provided the intellectual and the financial support for this entire venture. He grew up in Pembroke. He left when he was 14 and became a developer and was very successful. And he started giving back. So he has funded the Thomas Entrepreneurship Hub in other areas of the university. He has funded the Thomas School of Business, which is just now opening. It's a $38 million school of business, brand new. And also for a while, the only Opportunity Zone project in the state that is just now opened. It's a mixed use building with retail and residences called the A.S. Thomas Center. We focus, as I said, to try to create jobs through startups. We focus primarily on the citizens of these counties that we're focused on. Sometimes students do start businesses, that's great, but the way we use students is as interns and grad assistants and support groups. As I said, the key metric is job creation. So we really focus on getting those jobs created via successful startups. We also focus on other elements of the ecosystem. We have an ecosystem tracking study. We focus on awareness, engagement, things like that. Typically, if we can, we focus on businesses in the continuum between ag tech all the way through medical health, home health care, or non-medical home health care in that continuum. We do a lot of ag programs designed to help farmers, be better farmers, gap training, things like that, the good agricultural practices and things like that. A lot of networking events, a lot of startup events that will help them go from ideation all the way to a business plan, including marketing and funding and things like that. Just a side note on the pandemic, just coming out of it, we did not do any live events other than maybe a couple we tried when things looked like they were calming down. We kept our consulting going, and we consult still with a large number of startups, about 65 on average on any given week. And our incubator, we have 10 incubator spaces. We lost 6 companies right at the beginning in the spring of 2020, but it was somewhat surprising. We regained 10 very quickly by the summer. So our incubator has been full the entire pandemic, and we're hoping in the next couple of months to get back up to having events live and in person. One final thing I want to mention is we don't do this alone. We obviously we collaborate with a lot of very strong partners and very good partners. Golden Leaf and KBR, NCEDA, the Native American Trust is very helpful to us. And also the UNC system. Charles mentioned the Economic Transformation Council, where I sit with Mark and Don and the group, and it's extremely helpful to find out what other campuses are doing that are working, and to share ideas and communicate. In that regard, we're obviously very close to UNCP faculty, their ag programs, and their the business school, and NCEDA, NC Growth, the Keenan Institute, a lot of groups have been helping us to try to really improve this region. So with that, Charles, I am done with the overview, and thank you very much.
And thank you, Tom. And now, Mark, you're up.
Well, thank you and good morning, my economic development colleagues from around the state. As Randall shared in his opening remarks, the UNC system, as well as our private colleges and universities and our community colleges, can be real valuable assets for economic developers in a variety of ways. This was true historically and has become even more important as jobs have become more complex and are requiring a more talented workforce. The UNC Economic Transformation Council members and others on our campuses can provide assistance to you through ways like providing information to help you respond to inquiries from site consultants and companies. In meetings with recruitment prospects, they can share the relevant resources at your regional university. Many executives, of course, value the presence of a university as they make their location decisions. We also bring value to strategic planning for local or regional economic development organizations and can provide economic impact studies, feasibility studies, and custom research on selected topics. As one example of that from UNCW, our Cameron School of Business and the Wilmington Chamber produce a Wilmington Regional Economic Scorecard, and that link is in the chat box for you, the most recent one, which compares Wilmington to peer and aspirant cities on a variety of key metrics important to economic development. Most of our universities as well have extensive international connections that can be leveraged to increase foreign direct investment. You can also call on your local campus Economic Transformation Council member to make connections at other campuses and resources if needed. As was suggested by Tom's remarks, this is a team sport, and I'm happy to refer I'm happy to refer people to Pembroke or NC State or Western Carolina or any of our sister institutions if that is helpful. Perhaps most importantly, the point I want to make is that universities provide the talented workforce that is needed for companies that are relocating or existing industries that are growing. UNCW graduates around 5,000 new alumni every year, and that number is increasing rapidly. About half of our graduates are in what the UNC system calls critical workforce degrees, defined as STEM, health, and education. But we don't stop with just those programs. We continue to add very high demand programs. Over just the past 6 years under Chancellor Sartorelli, we've added degree programs in cybersecurity, business analytics, data science, coastal engineering, intelligent systems engineering, healthcare administration, respiratory therapy, supply chain management, and many more. These are programs that meet workforce needs where the students are in high demand when they graduate. We also focus on the placement of our students here at UNCW and have increased the number of Fortune 500 companies recruiting on campus from just 19 6 years ago to 228 this year. Some degree programs, some of our degree programs are started based on specific needs and requests of the private sector. And the best example of that I could offer is when Fred Eshelman, then headed up PPD, requested and helped UNCW create both undergraduate and graduate programs in clinical research, which has led to the extensive cluster of CROs here in the Wilmington region. And I have to tip my hat to Randall there as well. The NC Biotech Center has been instrumental in building that cluster in Wilmington. Other examples of cluster growth where UNC Wilmington played an important role include the film industry and the FinTech cluster. The FinTech cluster consisting of Live Oak Bank, Encino, Aperture, Vantica, and other companies. And I like to use a quote from when Aperture chose Wilmington as its home, and one of their executives was asked, why Wilmington? He responded, quote, "It's a great place to be, and we've got access to the University of North Carolina, Wilmington." Save a list of quotes like that serve the purpose of demonstrating that a lot of companies will choose a location based on the availability of talent from the university that's located there. We also contribute, of course, to economic development, as Don was commenting on, through research, innovation, and entrepreneurship. At UNCW Shellfish Research Hatchery, as an example, we use natural selection to breed bigger and better oysters specific to North Carolina waters. We created an online tool for siting oyster farms, and as of last year, farmed oysters now exceed wild-caught oysters in North Carolina. Similar to what Tom was describing at Pembroke and his hub, UNCW's Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship was started with strong support and encouragement from the business community. Last year, CIE worked with 148 entrepreneurs and startups and helped the Wilmington entrepreneurial ecosystem rank 93rd in the world in the most recent rankings. In December of 18, Carnegie moved UNCW into the Doctoral University High Research Activity classification, which moved us from the regional rankings to the national university rankings. Now, UNCW is recognized by US News and World Report as one of the top 100 public national universities, along with UNC Chapel Hill and NC State. One of our local media outlets recognized the impact of that reclassification and said, and I quote, "When the Carnegie classification of institutions of higher education designated the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, a doctoral university high research activity, it was more than just an academic honor. It was recognition of the school's longtime effort to award more PhDs and encourage more research. And it's paying dividends to the school and to the region. The research is encouraging more startup companies locally, a boon to the local economy and job market," end quote. I could go a lot further and talk about our connections to the military and our many ways that we work with our community colleges, but I've shared long enough. And so in summary, I'll just say that universities can be important tools for economic development, whether it's helping to recruit new companies, grow the existing businesses or clusters in your area, or starting new businesses. Feel free to reach out to me if I can be of any help to you in connecting you to resources here at UNC Wonderful. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. And Pat, you're on.
Well, Charles, thank you very much. Very much appreciate being included in this discussion. I'm here because I'm the chair of the board of trustees at a university in North Carolina, UNC Pembroke. And I having been in economic development for 10 years, as well as on two different economic development boards, one in 03 and one in 13-14. I think I've had the opportunity to gain some perspective as it relates to how we are viewed and how perhaps we should be viewed in terms of economic development in North Carolina. So I've been a trustee 7 years. My second year as the chair of the board of trustees at UNCP. Some of you may recall the old days, I guess they are old days now, when we had regional partnerships across the state of North Carolina. Those were pretty valuable, I thought at the time. The legislature didn't agree and defunded all of them. There are still a couple left that do good work, but a lot of orphans, a lot of counties were orphaned, a lot of the state was orphaned without a focal point. Now, if you look strategically, if you look at geographics and you look at the location of our universities, they're placed exactly where you need them to impact economic development in those regions. However, I don't believe every university is strategically focused on economic development. For example, if we look at even my own institution, I can tell you that some of the senior leadership at my institution does not know who the Economic Development Partnership for North Carolina is, nor what they do. I know that's incredible to you, and that's incredible to me. But I don't think we're alone. I don't think that's it. I think that what we need in North Carolina at the university level, which we have to varying degrees with individuals who are some on this webinar today, is a cabinet level position for economic development at each institution. And that role would have a primary focus of bringing together all the resources of the university to bring to bear on the region for economic development. For example, at UNCP, we have a brand new school of business. It's an accredited school of business, a Thomas School of Business coming out of the ground, just opened up. It's incredible. It can be a huge player in that multi-county area, but it needs to be strategic in its approach to how you do that. We have a new $94 million health facilities building, healthcare building that's coming out of the ground. And that's to prepare students for careers in healthcare in one of the most underserved areas of in the state of North Carolina, which would be Robeson County and in Columbus County and those around the area. That should also be a strategic focus through economic development, but that doesn't exist right now. I think it can. I think Tom does a wonderful job at UNCP with entrepreneurship. I believe that adding a position at the cabinet level, and by the way, the cabinet is really, that's the chancellor's team. At different universities, it could be different people, but ED, to my knowledge, is not represented on the cabinet level. Maybe one, but if you know the impacts that some of the folks in the state, like Mark and others, can have, if we look at Tom White at NC State, and I've for many occasions, I've dealt with Tom to help bring to bear the resources of the university from a broad basis on specific areas of economic opportunity. Most recently was the recruitment of the United States Golf Association second headquarters to Pinehurst, which was a very diverse endeavor that included needing a lot of those folks from NC State to participate. Tom was a quarterback to get them all involved. Tom does a great job. And at NC State, and as we know at Wilmington, and we know at UNC, there are people to focus on that. There are people, but we don't have those people at other institutions that I think could be significant impactors through that process. So realigning economic development as a primary focus of each institution in its region to impact that region should be something we should consider. And if I'm not on the board of governors, but if I were, that would be the primary focus I would have, would be to bring that to bear. Finally, I believe there should be a new partnership, economic development partnership between the universities and the community colleges. I don't necessarily believe that process is strategic. I think it's tactical. I think we all know that we can bring to bear the great talent and tools provided by our community colleges in our area, in our community. However, I don't believe that's the case necessarily regionally. In my 10 years as ED here in Moore County, I was invited to one regional community college meeting. That was it. So I think there's room and there's opportunity there to share thoughts between the leadership of the community colleges as it relates to training and all the things that they do well, and more of us from ED engaging with them. So those are just some thoughts of a retired ED person that thinks that there's some great opportunities to redesign the economic development play on the part of the universities here in North Carolina. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you, Pat, and I appreciate that, and thank you, Don, Tom, and Mark. I think we've gotten a pretty good overview of these three institutions, and then an overview of someone that has a different lens that they're looking through, and I think it was very beneficial to me. And so now, if we you can, in the chat box, if you have questions, please do that, and I'll try to see what we have. Melanie O'Connell Underwood wanted to know if there was a list of a contact at every UNC university where we can get assistance to connect companies to each of the universities, and Don answered that in the chat. But basically, tell them what you said, Don. Tell everybody else what you said in case they didn't see the chat.
Yeah, the group is probably the Economic Transformation Council. The folks who've been appointed to that basically have the responsibility of helping facilitate those connections on behalf of their individual institutions. So folks like Mark and me and Tom. play roles like that. And we can send out, I'll send to Lawrence and Liz the current list for that group that can be distributed to the members who are in attendance. And basically what we could do is be that facilitator. In other words, if we get an inquiry, doesn't matter what it is, it doesn't matter where it needs to go, we can save people the trouble of trying to figure that out themselves and get the people to the right place.
Thank you, Don. And as someone else said, please remember the Veronica Creech, Vice President of Economic Development, said, everybody, please remember the private schools and HBCUs when planning regional conversations. Of course, two of the HBCUs are part of the university system, and they are certainly part of it. And I think NCEDA with this group is going to also reach out to the private universities to include them in this whole initiative to talk. So, but they certainly are a real plus.
Could I add to that point that we have most recently, for the meetings of the last year, included Phil Kirk representing the North Carolina independent colleges and universities. And he has begun planning for a similar organization within the NCICU to the UNC Economic Transformation Council. And so, yes, we're happy to work with our private sector partners. My Chapel Hill friends need to put their earplugs in, but I was a Duke undergrad, so I'm biased toward the private sector as well there.
And Phil Kirk, who Mark mentioned, works with the private universities, and he is a member of the Transformation Council. So that is in the works to do that too. Because obviously, I think it's 36 private universities we have in our state, and they contribute a great deal. So obviously. Other questions or comments?
Charles, good afternoon. We have a number of community college folks on the webinar today. I was hoping that everybody could, while we're on the topic of other partners, talk about how you collaborate with your community college partners for economic development.
You want me to, can I jump in on there, Lawrence and Charles?
Sure.
Sure.
So again, I run the Thomas Entrepreneurship Hub down in Pembroke. We do it in a couple ways. One is the president of Robinson Community College is on our board. So when we meet and discuss strategy and collaboration, they're right there. And the second way is through this new initiative called the Sand Hills Entrepreneurship Engagement Network, which covers the 10 counties in this region. And in that network, there's resource partners identified. Those are groups that can help startups and small businesses. Every single one of the 8 community colleges in this region is represented in that network. So that's another way that we get them. So you have the SBCs at the community college as well as the SBTDC group here. So we're all connected, sharing best practices and events and things like that.
Somewhat similarly here at Wilmington, our SBTDC and the Cape Fear Community College SBC and Brunswick SBC and other community colleges in the regions work very closely together. In regard to entrepreneurship specifically, I'll say that there is a group called the Coalition in Wilmington that have a shared calendar of events and coordinate their activities that also reaches out to Cape Fear Community College, and the SBC is a part of that discussion. Obviously, the most important way for universities and community colleges to collaborate is through the transfer process, and I'm very pleased to say that we have agreements here at UNCW with over 40 of the 58 community colleges. If you're not a part of that, we want you as a partner, and that is basically a transfer agreement process that facilitates easy transfer from community colleges to UNCW academic programs.
I would add just to, I mean, Mark's absolutely right. That whole process of articulating pathways for community college students to enter through the university and complete degree training is major goal for the system and for the institutions. You know, at UNC, a couple of examples, you know, we have a team in our Institute for Convergent Science that's been working very closely with NC State, actually, on some various funding proposals for developing gene therapy manufacturing in North Carolina, improving that process, helping build workforce, and they've worked with Alamance Community College, Central Carolina Community College on those initiatives. And I think there's really some exciting opportunities that can be explored there. And then we work individually with our community colleges on, for example, programs that, you know, directly develop workforce for the university. I think we have one with Durham Tech right now, helping channel people into our labs.
I think one of the things that differentiates North Carolina from so many of the competing states is our university system. We have the strongest university system in the nation, and the resources are there for economic developers to use if we just will use them. And you have on this group three people that own the Economic Transformation Council, and there's someone there representing each of the public universities, and it's now going to be expanded, or at least attempted to be, to the private. So if you need someone that is an expert in monoclonal antibodies as it relates to XYZ, somebody in one of these university systems is probably the global, or at least among the global experts in that. If you need someone that's expert in logistics and supply side, well, we have those experts. And when we're making calls on companies, whether it's the site selection consultants or whether it's anybody else, I think you should contact one of these guys or somebody else in your area and say, hey, we need somebody to go with us to because I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm an economic developer. I don't know that details about that stuff, but they do. And that goes back to the history that Don said when Bill Little was a chemistry professor at UNC Chapel Hill and got on those Piedmont planes and flew around the nation recruiting companies. So it's not something that we haven't done, and we've been doing it for decades. And so I think sometimes we don't use the universities as much as we should. They're one of our greatest assets. And I'm one that believes so go our university system, so goes our state. And so, you know, so I just encourage you just to use them, reach out, bother them, make Mark and Tom and Don and everybody say, good Lord, I wish we hadn't done that. They're bothering me to death, bother them.
You know, I would add, Charles, to that, the Economic Transformation Council that you were part of establishing and that has, you know, been a function of the system office for, you know, many years now, does have the potential to be a real resource in economic development. You know, when North Carolina was competing for the Amazon hub, while it didn't locate in North Carolina, the state received, I think, very positive feedback on the work that was done to engage the universities in that recruitment process and the level of collaboration between the different institutions that were part of the discussion and the way in which the state was able to present kind of a unified front on behalf of the resources that the university could bring to bear was very, very well received. And I think that's one of the great things about this group is that it can serve as that kind of platform to coordinate input from all of the institutions when there's really a major economic development project on the horizon.
And thank you, Don. And Robin Spinks has asked, is there a brief summary of the primary research focuses on each campus? I doubt that the universities do anything brief, but there probably are summaries. If someone could answer that, I would appreciate it.
Go ahead, Mark.
To the best of my knowledge, it is only available on a campus by campus basis, as opposed to a comprehensive document for all of the campuses. And of course, our campuses vary in terms of their level of research that's going on and the breadth of their research. Obviously, Chapel Hill and State as R1s are giants in that field. And then there is a group of 5 of us that are in what's called R2 status, UNC Charlotte, UNC Greensboro, NCA&T, ECU, and Wilmington. You're going to find more research on those 7 campuses as generally. And Robin, I can provide to you offline what I have in terms of summaries of the research strengths at each of the campuses. I also want to use this opportunity to make one other point, and that is acknowledging our limitations and what we don't know. We don't have all the answers, and if there are ways that universities can help in economic development that we're not helping, or if we're doing something but not doing it the right way, in your opinion, we welcome that feedback and input as well.
Mark, I just want to add on to that. There's going to be published, I think in a couple months, a new website highlighting each campus that's going to be published by the Economic Transformation Council. We've been working on that, and it'll have a profile of each campus. I think it's going to be out in 2 months, around then.
Yeah, Tom, that's great, because that's exactly what the goal of that site is, to be able to provide those insights at a really high level so that it's easily digestible and you can then quickly pursue what you're interested in with individual universities.
Mm-hmm.
There was at one time a website that linked all of the research, and you could find the researchers that were leading wherever, who they were collaborating with around the world. I don't remember what that was called, but I think it fell by the wayside because of funding. Mark, you got any?
Yes, it was the Reach NC project, and it was a wonderful site for as long as it lasted, but it was a bear to maintain, and so it was discontinued during the Great Recession.
Yeah, that's it. It was a resource that was of its time, and ultimately, I think at the moment now there are a number of commercial products that the universities essentially buy into that perform the functions for the universities that they needed, but they're not as useful as Reach NC would have been as a tool for someone to explore, who's not from within the academic community to explore. But yeah, that was the outcome of that.
I think we've got time for a few more questions. If anyone has any comments or questions. Well, if not, I don't see any. I thank you all participants for your time. And I've learned a lot, and I think it's been very beneficial, and I hope it's been well received across the participants that are part of this webinar. And now I will turn it over to whoever I'm supposed to turn it over to. Lawrence, is that you? Oh, Randall.
Me, Charles. Thank you, Charles. Great discussion, everyone, and appreciate your valuable insights today. And as you know, your campuses are all important players in the North Carolina Economic Development team, and we appreciate your leadership. And thanks as well to our audience members for all those thoughtful questions and for the great resources that the panelists sent back out. I'm going to link into some of those later as well. As I mentioned earlier, this is the second in a series of webinars showcasing the role of our public and private colleges and universities in boosting North Carolina's intellectual capital and ultimately our economy. So watch your e-news in the coming weeks for additional offerings in this series. Also note the registrations are now open for 2 in-person events. Our members in the Charlotte region will not want to miss the networking luncheon there we've scheduled on Thursday, February 24th. Ken Haynes, the Enterprise Vice President at Atrium Health, will be discussing his company's latest wave of expansions and what they mean for the region's economy and communities. And then registration is also open for the NCEDA Spring Conference and Site Selector Summit. That event will take place in Pinehurst on March 13 to 15. It's already shaping up to be a valuable opportunity to build relationships with global location advisors and showcase all the great things happening here in North Carolina. So we hope you can join us for those. Please check your emails and NCEDA website for more details on both of those events. And of course, our thanks, as always, go to NCEDA's annual sponsors. Those organizations and businesses offer year-round support of professional development webinars like this one, and we're very grateful to them. Please thank them if you see them, all the logos that you saw Emily scroll earlier. We look forward to seeing you again next time, either virtually or in person. In the meantime, stay well and stay engaged. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank everybody.